Good morning, everyone. I'm John Handy, Communications Director for the House Republican Caucus, and I'd like to welcome you to our Republican Media Availability. With us today from the House of Representatives, we have House Republican Leader Drew Stokesbury from the 31st District and House Republican Deputy Leader Mike Steele from the 12th District. And from the Senate, we have Senate Republican Leader John Braun from the 20th District and Senator Matt Benke, ranking Republican on the Senate Human Services Committee from the 8th District. And with that, I will turn it over to House Republican Leader Drew Stokesbury for some opening remarks.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on what looks like it will be our last media availability of the session. It is actually turning out to be a pretty good session. A very good session for House Republicans, not so good of a session for Bob Ferguson. Through the course of the 57 days or so that have gone by so far, a large number of the bad bills that would have taken Washington in the wrong direction have died, either in a Senate committee or on the Senate floor or on the House floor. In no small part due to the work by House and Senate Republicans. We managed to, over the past couple weeks, kill a bill that would have given unemployment insurance to striking workers, which would have badly disrupted our state's really sound and robust unemployment insurance system. On Friday night, we were able to, on the House floor, defeat a bill that would have given the Attorney General unprecedented power to regulate hospital mergers that would have had the effect of devastating healthcare in rural communities. The Senate twice now was able to defeat a bill to establish rent control in Washington state, which would have had devastating long-term consequences for the construction of new housing and affordable housing. Likewise, they were able to defeat the transit-oriented development bill, which would have ironically shifted construction away from transit and bus stops. Bills to create an independent prosecutor unit in the Attorney General's office, again, giving the Attorney General far more power than he currently has, failed as well. A bill to get rid of odd year elections and make even year elections much more complicated and costly for local candidates failed, and a bill to give judges authority to reduce sentences of violent criminals behind bars has failed as well. So a large number of bad bills, several of which were highly supported by the Attorney General, which would have given Bob Ferguson's office a lot more power, have all died in the last 57 days. And House and Senate Republicans, I think, are largely responsible for that. The other good news is that yesterday, the House and Senate both passed 3 initiatives to the legislature. We passed an initiative that would ban state and local income taxes in Washington state. We passed an initiative that would create some additional sets of parent rights for students in the K-12 system, and we passed one more that's escaping me at the moment. Senator Braun will fill in there. The last bill that is kind of on our radar for the last couple of days is a bill to ban natural gas. And that has taken a lot of twists and turns. But the latest twist is that even some low-income social justice advocates are now advocating against the bill because even they recognize that this will have a devastating impact on ratepayers without hardly any environmental benefits. So House and Senate Republicans, I think, will be hard at work the next couple of days, talking to our colleagues and reminding them that as the bill stands now, it will increase rates, and it will do very little to make our energy grid more efficient. It is a pretty bad trade-off. House Republicans will stand united if the bill comes back to the floor in opposing any changes that would increase electric and utility rates to ratepayers. We encourage House Democrats to join us. So with that, I want to turn it over briefly to one of my colleagues from here in the House, my Deputy Republican Leader, Mike Steele.
Well, good morning. I think Representative Stokesbury encapsulated the efforts in the House very, very well. It has been a very grueling session. The short 60 days that we're nearing an end to has been indeed a fight all the way to the end. We are proud of the work that we've done. And as Rep. Stokesbury mentioned, we killed what we believe to be some of the worst bills we've seen here in the legislature. We've got some more work to do. We've got budgets coming up to finalize and pass. We have, again, this PSE bill that we're working diligently on to stand against. And we have the final 2 days of session where we hope to move some bills that we think are going to do some good things for Washington State, and then continue to work against some of the ones that we see as pretty bad for Washington State. We will wrap this session up, I think, pretty proud of our efforts. And again, just to reiterate, the work that our caucus did as the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans, I think will be remembered here in the state as something that was really, really solid legislative work, and will help many Washingtonians across this state. So we're proud of that, and look forward to taking your questions this morning.
And we'll now turn it over to my Senate counterpart, Senate Republican leader, John Braun.
Great. Thanks, Drew and Mike. It was a great intro. You covered many of the things that have gone on in this session. I just want to take us back to our priorities, starting the session, throughout the session, and how that kind of relates to the work we've been doing to shape the policy that came out of this legislative session to help Washington. We're focused on public safety, and I don't think there's any more obvious effort on public safety than the initiative to the legislature that passed out of both chambers yesterday that would put their pursuit law back to what it was before the tragic change made by the Democratic majorities in 2021. We now line up with the other 49 states in the country, allow officers to pursue based on reasonable suspicion. We know since that change that we've seen a huge spike in lawlessness, and we lead the nation, or nearly lead the nation, in retail theft and auto theft. We've had sadly, all kinds of new records broken when it comes to crime. And this is one step, an important step, but only one step to get us back in the right direction. On affordability, again, I think this has been a priority for us in a lot of ways, but few things highlight that more than the initiative yesterday that would ban an income tax both at the state and the local level. And yes, we don't, our Constitution does have some bans, but I think it's important for the people of the state of Washington, clearly important to over 400,000 that signed the initiative, that we stand up and say, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to put in place law that will prevent these types of additional taxes for people who are already having trouble making their way financially in our state. And then finally, when it comes to education, which has been our third priority, again, the initiative has been the initiative passed yesterday, 2081, that would help re-involve parents in their children's education in a positive way, give them access to their curriculum, help them understand what's happening in the school, and better involve them in their, in a day-to-day education of their children. I think that's a tremendous win for parents, for students, and frankly for our education system. Just one step, and we have a long way to go to get our kids back on track, but I think it's a very important step. Lots of other work going on. I think that Drew and Mike did a good job of highlighting all the bills. I would just say, we've worked really hard this session to build a philosophical majority across the aisle. Neither of us in the House or the Senate have the votes to stop these bills on our own, even when we know they're going to be bad for the state of Washington. But we've worked hard to find folks who agree with us, who will stand with us to stop these bills, and across the board, from public safety, where we stopped a number of bills that frankly were aimed at letting violent criminals, convicted criminals, out of jail earlier, either through rescoring or different prosecutions. There's a whole slew of bills like that that we were able to stop because people recognize that's the wrong thing for our state right now. I'll add on affordability, we worked really hard to stop this increase in the property tax, first at the state and local level, and then when they pulled back to just the local level, we stopped at the local level also. This was a huge impact. We talked of only being a 1 to 3% increase, but that 3% makes a big difference over time. After 10 years, that was nearly, in the original bill was nearly $10 billion in new taxes, and it went up because of compounding over $1 billion a year after that. So we're really proud of the work we did to stop that and help keep housing affordable for both homeowners and renters. Education, I just want to highlight a couple quick things. We did, some good stuff in education. Just through legislation, we passed a bill that will allow schools to get easier access to the special education safety net. Small bill, but an important bill, in an effort we've worked in a bipartisan manner for probably 6 years now, trying to address and get our special education system back in good order. One bill I'm disappointed in, we worked really hard on, is chronic absenteeism. I worked hard to address that issue. Sadly, that bill died in the House of Appropriations committee, and we won't have that in front of us to help schools get after chronic absenteeism across the state. It's a big problem. We can't get our kids back on track if they're not actually in the classroom, and we'll keep working on that. I could go on and on. There's a lot of things we did. I think that, as I said earlier, most of the bills that we were able to stop that would have been bad policy have already been mentioned. We do have a few things left to go. And while 1589, the bill that would significantly increase energy prices for both electricity and gas, is over in the House, and that's work in front of our colleagues in the House today. We're also standing firm and have to try to stop that bill if we can from going forward. And I'm going to stop there. We have some folks who have joined us now, so I'm going to ask Senator Matt Benke to make a few comments, and then we'll go to questions.
Thanks, Senator Braun, and thanks, Representative Stokesbury, Representative Steele. I think truly my opening comments would be it's a team effort across the aisle, across the board, when we reach out and we educate individuals about what the complexities of these bills are and really the impacts where they're going to be at, all up and down the social economical chains that we're seeing today. When it impacts people in the Tri-City areas and even in downtown King County, you can bring a coalition together of building relationships to where people are impacted more than they realize. When these bills get back into their wallets, the price of crime go through the roof, community safety we need to get back to. Those are messages we need to bring, of course, to the state, but across the nation. I think a lot of this with the initiatives is sharing the voice of the people and getting back to understanding that we are legislators, but we are here for the voice of the people, ensuring what we can do and meet that voice and share that voice throughout. And can't thank them enough to working with us on the 3 initiatives. We do want to get all 6. We still are pushing for all 6, and hopefully the other side will see that and help us get these 6 in there before the end of the session. It is a tight window, but we're looking forward to answering any questions on that, as well as some of the other wins that was mentioned before. So I'll turn it over to John Handy.
All right. With that, we will go to Shauna Salisbury of McClatchy.
Morning. This is more for Senator Braun, but you touched on the chronic absenteeism that died in House Appropriations. What were some of the issues with that bill that didn't quite get it over the finish line? And do you have any idea how you will address it next year?
Well, it's not really clear to me what the issues were there. Sometimes just in the rush of bills, it just doesn't make it through. There are a lot of bills that go through the fiscal committees as you get close to cut off, and I think that there just wasn't enough push to get it across the line. Is all I can say right now. We'll learn more as things go on, but I don't think we stop. This is not a problem that's going to go away on its own. And there is I think we've done some good by just highlighting the issue and making it better known, both within the legislature and the work that many folks in the media have done to highlight this issue. I think is valuable for people to understand. So that's something. But we can't stop. We'll bring the same bill back there, or maybe as we learn more about any concerns that the House there were in the House, that we'll address those concerns and bring it back with whatever improvements are needed to get it across the line. We can't stop working on this. It's not going to fix itself. We got to raise awareness and give school districts the tools they need to get after this.
Did you have a follow-up, Shauna?
Yeah, I guess more broadly, for both caucuses, what do you feel like the legislature kind of failed to adequately address this year, and how do you see that being addressed coming up in the next year?
So I'd highlight a couple things. It goes back to our priorities. I think two of them where we stopped, I'd go to affordability where we stopped, but I think are some bad things in terms of tax increases, in terms of things that would have made housing more expensive. But we didn't turn the corner. Last year, you saw us make some progress, incremental progress on housing as an example. I don't think we saw that this year. We basically held our own. I'd like to think we didn't go backwards. We didn't make progress, and we have a long way to go. Again, a problem that's not going to solve itself. And then on education, we did I think some good things with regard to special education, but we did not, and we did some good things in terms of funding with MSOC. But in terms of actually addressing learning loss and getting kids back on track and recognizing that our standards in terms of standardized tests have fallen dramatically over the last several years, we didn't do near enough, in my view, to turn this around and get us headed in the right direction.
Yeah, since the first day of session, I think House Republicans have been saying that we've got to fix Washington. That was my speech on the first day of session. That's what we've been trying to highlight. Whenever we are talking with our constituents, talking with you all in the media, talking to the public, we've got to stop going in the wrong direction and fix Washington. So as I noted a minute ago, I think we did a pretty good job this session, stopping us from continuing to go in the wrong direction. But we've still done very little to actually fix some of the problems. So one of our top priorities is to fix the housing and homelessness crisis. It is great that we did not pass bills that would have dried up the supply of affordable housing and driven new construction away from the most dense transit-friendly areas. But we need to do more. We need to actually encourage and incentivize the building of more housing. So bills like Representative Sam Lowe's rural ADU bill or Representative Barkas's lot splitting bill, which both died at the hands of Democrats, I think is a huge failure. A big disappointment that we are not embracing every opportunity to create more housing supply and build our way out of the housing crisis. We've got to fix the public safety crisis. The Pursuit Initiative that passed the House and Senate floors yesterday is a great start, but we remain 51st in the nation in terms of police officers per capita. And despite the Speaker and the Governor both saying the first week of session that these were priorities of theirs, despite there being bipartisan bills offered with prime sponsors from both caucuses, not a single bill moved forward in the process. And we've done nothing to actually provide more resources to cities and counties to hire more police officers, not to mention nothing to begin to change the culture around law enforcement so that we're not pushing people out of the profession, but instead are actually encouraging the best and brightest of the next generation to become law enforcement officers. We got to fix the affordability crisis. And again, it is great that we didn't pass laws that would have made it harder to find a job or would have made it harder to find affordable housing in the long run. Both budgets provide a little bit of money in the form of energy rebates to low-income utility users. But we should be doing much more. April Connors had a bill that would have provided rebates to Washington drivers to offset the high price of gas that we paid. A big missed opportunity is the legislature not passing the initiative that would have repealed the CCA. The silver lining there is it will go to voters. But in the meantime, Washingtonians will continue to pay 50 cents to $1 more in gas to solve a problem that is not of Washington's making and is not a problem that Washington can solve. Republicans believe it is fundamentally unfair to ask working Washingtonians to pay for the ills of countries like China. But that's exactly what the CCA does. I'm pleased that there will be a chance for voters to repeal it, but it is too bad the legislature didn't repeal it ourselves, or at the very least use some of the excess revenues to offset the high price of gas that drivers have been paying for the last year. So I could go on, talk about issues in terms of our failure to begin fixing the drug crisis. There's a bill, I think, from Senator Patton that passed the Senate but died in the House at the hands of House Democrats. That's unfortunate. We have done next to nothing to actually ameliorate the learning loss that was suffered during the pandemic. Nothing that I think will get us improve our test scores. Again, 50% of kids are failing reading standards and 60% are failing math standards. We haven't passed any bills that will address that, and we haven't done anything to increase the amount of childcare available in Washington State. So, while it's good that the legislature has not made the state of things that much worse this session, we have missed so many opportunities to fix Washington and finally make things better.
All right, with that, we'll go to Claire from the Seattle Times.
Hi, good morning. I know you've touched a little bit on some state spending areas, but I'd be curious to talk about the budget a little bit more as we approach the kind of final days of session. Is there any sort of good investments in the budget, anything that you don't agree with, just anything you would want to spotlight or talk about as sort of reflective of what you all accomplished or weren't able to do this session? Thank you.
Well, we don't know the negotiated budget just yet, so I don't think we can talk about that with any clarity. What I can talk about is some of a few of the highlights from the Senate budget, and perhaps Representative Stokesbury could talk about the House budget. And the Senate budget, I think it's not a Republican budget. I want to be clear about that, and we don't love all of it, but several of us voted for it for the simple reason that it met a few key criteria. The growth rate was the smallest growth rate that we've seen in a supplemental budget since 2016, when the Republicans wrote the budget in the Senate. It kept almost $1 billion, right at $1 billion more in reserves than the governor's proposed budget. And while I personally would like to see even more in reserves, I think we have to keep building that up, because while the number is large, our budgets are getting larger, so we need more in reserve. It is significantly better than others proposed, so we supported that, and it didn't rely on new taxes. They eventually walked away from this income or the increase in property taxes and the proposed increase in real estate excise taxes. So those are three good things that made this budget somewhat better. It also included many of our priorities, and some of those have already been mentioned, having to do with getting after the opioid and overdose crisis that we have, including a bill that did actually make it across the line in the tribal and dedicating money to addressing overdoses in tribal communities and in helping them with the real crisis they have on their hands in a meaningful way. So that's good. I would like to see us do more in terms of education to prevent drug use and overdoses. I don't think we did nearly enough there, and we didn't do nearly enough to protect, as an example, the bill that would have added exposure to fentanyl to the child endangerment law. Sadly died in the House committee because Democrats wouldn't move it forward. That's a bill that's pretty straightforward. Somehow it's okay to expose young children, sometimes fatally, to fentanyl, but not to other hard drugs, where it is actually against the law. It doesn't make any sense. And it's all just ideological that they're gonna oppose any new law that because not because it makes sense. It's crazy. So broadly, I would say that's where we were to start with. How it's gone in negotiation, I don't think we know. At least I don't know. We'll find that out, I think, probably later today or perhaps tomorrow morning when they brief the caucuses on the negotiated budget.
Yeah, and just a couple sort of missed opportunities to answer that part of your question, Claire. I mentioned a second ago that there were several bills that would have provided through different funding formulas, essentially at the end of the day, more resources to state and city officials to hire more law enforcement officers and retain the ones that we do have. That also could have been done in various ways through the budget. At the end of the day, money won't solve the problem alone, but there are jurisdictions where money would help stem the tide. And but neither the House nor Senate budget, to my knowledge, has any kind of grant money for cities and counties to hire more law enforcement officers. I also mentioned a second ago that April Connors had a bill that would have provided rebates out of the excess CCA revenue to Washington drivers. Again, that's something that we could do in the budget, but neither budget did that. Skylar Rude had a bill that would have increased paraeducators and tutors. Chris Corey had a bill that would have added reading coaches in elementary schools. Both of those would have cost some money and could have been done in the budget. Would have gone a long way towards helping to reduce the learning loss that was suffered and improve test scores through high dosage tutoring and more effective reading teaching strategies. But again, unfortunately, those were ignored by Democrats, and big missed opportunity there. So the last one I'll touch on is reimbursement rates for Medicaid. Washington State remains one of the lowest states in the country in terms of Medicaid reimbursements. House Republicans had a proposal to increase Medicaid funding out of marijuana revenue. Even House Democrats had a proposal to increase Medicaid funding using sort of a semi-complicated Medicaid match formula. But neither of those got any traction. And it's frustrating because this should be one of our priorities. And while Senator Braun is right, we haven't seen the conference budget yet between the respective majority parties. In the House Democrat budget, for example, they spent about $2.2 billion in new money over 4 years. And how higher Medicaid rates aren't already a priority, much less a priority among within the $2.2 billion in added spending just in this supplemental budget is beyond me. But it is far past time for the legislature to put its money where its mouth is and improve Medicaid reimbursement rates so that we stop losing providers in rural areas and we stop increasing the premium rates for folks like me that have their own health insurance. So very frustrating lost opportunity there. And also want to briefly turn it over to Mike Steele to mention some of the stuff in the capital budget that we're doing. So, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Stokesbury. Yes, we, as Senator Braun mentioned, we aren't able to release a lot of the details on that final negotiated budget until it's public. But I can tell you areas of focus and priorities. The capital budget, of course, is a truly bipartisan budget, bicameral budget. Both the House and the Senate worked to agree on a final budget this weekend. And, this is the budget that I always say is the economic development budget, the infrastructure budget for Washington State. It puts people to work in every part of Washington, and it does develop projects and do big projects for even the smallest of communities. And so that's really important. We made record investments, even as supplemental year, in housing and in education. School construction primarily is the capital budget's responsibility. We made investments in higher ed, investments in infrastructure, as I mentioned, across Washington. So I think I'm proud of the work that we do in that budget, proud every year of the finally compromised agreement that we reach. Sometimes it's challenging to get there, but we always end up at the end of the day agreeing and again deploying money across Washington to help every family, and we did focus on that. It's an interesting budget over the last couple of years because we have had interesting revenues in terms of capital gains and CCA, and the debate on how we use those and what happens if those monies aren't there. And we're very, very practical, I think, in how we approach that. And for priorities, we made sure we used bonds where we could to make sure that those things that we really wanted to see funded happened. And no matter what happens in November with those initiatives, if those monies are repealed, we will still have a solid capital budget that still continues to help people. And so I'm really proud of that. But again, our priorities in this budget will include housing, school construction, and infrastructure development and deployment. So excited to finally see that public later this week.
Claire, did you have a follow-up?
I don't. That's helpful. Thank you.
All right, next we'll go to Bill from Washington State Standard.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my question. Thanks for holding the call. Kind of a follow-up on the budget. I know you all have highlighted the rate of growth with budgets over the past, decade or so on past calls. when Democrats respond to that, they often say, well, then what would Republicans propose cutting? I heard you all highlight there some areas where you would have liked to see money go. But I know the final budget proposals aren't out, but you've seen the proposals from your respective chambers. Where are some areas where you think money is going in the budget right now where, it might be trimmed, cut, redirected, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I think that the most obvious thing to me, and understand this is close to a $72 billion budget. So there's a lot of stuff in there, and it's hard to capture all of it. But the thing we haven't done hasn't been done even remotely in the last 7 years since the Republicans had the majority in the Senate, is haven't gone through line by line and asked agencies to look for savings. You would never think about not doing that in either your household budget or in any kind of a business budget. You would be constantly looking at that, but we have not done that. And that sounds really general, but it doesn't take much. I mean, think about this. If you said, okay, agency heads, go out and we'd like you to find 1% of your budget that is no longer adequately serving the taxpayers. Just 1%. That's not a hard ask, not even close to a hard ask. That's $700 million, just like that. And I think you could easily do it. We did it effectively in the past as high as 10%. Now, I think 10% is probably a little high, but that would be $7 billion. But somewhere in there, there's an enormous amount that any normal private organization would do this routinely. They'd say, okay, we've invested in things that we thought were good ideas for the public. It turns out they're not really working very well. The solution we had wasn't quite right, or we can do it more efficiently because of technology. Therefore, we can save money. We're not doing that at all, not even a little bit. So that's the most basic opportunity we have, and it's plain there. Now, there are some limited areas where we don't have that kind of flexibility, and I acknowledge that. But almost everywhere we do. We have the ability to go back and look on a broad base. And I don't think necessarily the legislature is the best place to make those decisions. I think in most cases, if the agencies are well led and they recognize how they serve the public, they are in the best place to make those decisions, to have the best impact in terms of cost savings. And the other thing I would say here is you can two things come out of that. One, I think you get a leaner, more effective organization. And two, it's not just savings that in our world might result in tax reductions in certain areas. It can also be reinvested, and we've seen this lots of times where we've reinvested into areas, particularly in places like our developmentally disabled citizens or special education, where we can better serve folks, vulnerable populations in our state through savings just from reviewing what we're doing right now and why we're doing it. I believe very firmly, having been very deep in the budget in the past, that there's a lot of opportunity here. Opportunity that no one would even notice in terms of services delivered, but would bend the cost curve significantly over time to the tune of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars.
Yeah, I will echo what Senator Braun said. 2 or 3 years ago, the House and Senate Republicans both produced their own budgets that balanced over 4 years, and were able to do so without providing any reduction in services that people need or depend on. Senator Braun's right. The way we do budgets in Olympia essentially assumes that if something was a good idea in the past, it must continue to be a good idea and work going forward. And those are just fundamentally flawed assumptions. Everything in the budget, virtually everything, is a good idea. But it doesn't always fix the problem that we want it to fix. That just because it's a good idea doesn't mean it's the most effective way to fix the problem we want to fix. But we have no infrastructure or capacity or practice where we are sort of constantly evaluating and reevaluating the success of new programs we fund. We fund it in 1 year and then just put it on autopilot and perpetually fund it forever. That makes it virtually impossible to actually contain costs and contain unnecessary government growth. But it can be done. And again, the fact that all of the $2.2 billion that will be driven out in the supplemental budget this year all of it is a good idea, but is it a better idea than tax cuts? I've got a lot of constituents that would say they're not going to benefit a dime from the $2.2 billion in new spending this supplemental year, but they would benefit from some tax cuts. And again, when we adjourned sine die less than 12 months ago, Democrats talked about how great their budget was. They didn't lament that it was $2.2 billion shy of solving all of the problems. So if it wasn't $2.2 billion of being perfect 12 months ago, I don't understand why spending an extra $2.2 billion this year is an absolute must-have, and spending anything short of that would be tantamount to devastating cuts for people that depend on services. It just isn't true. There's just one party that has the political power and wants to spend every last dollar, and there's another party that is fighting to return some of this back to the taxpayers.
Do you have a follow-up, Bill?
Yeah, I have a follow-up on a different topic. This is kind of a big picture, broad sort of end of session kind of question. But, given the passage of the initiatives, and you all have kind of gotten at this earlier in the call, but given the passage of the initiative, the three initiatives, and, some of the collapse of some of the higher profile Democratic priority bills that you've talked about, would you say that this has been one of the more successful sessions for Republicans in recent years since you've all been in the minority?
I think you could characterize it that way. I would characterize it slightly different. I think it's been a hugely successful session for the people of the state of Washington. Not only did they, thankfully get 3 of the 6 initiatives sent to the legislature passed and will go into law here in 90 days. And while I very much like to see the next 3 passed, I think that's probably unlikely at this point. They also got, the legislature to really listen to them when it comes to things like property taxes, when it comes to things like public safety and housing, and stop bad policy that's that was making it worse. And I think so good session for Republicans. Yeah. Great session for the people of the state of Washington. Absolutely.
Yeah, I will echo that. Like I said at the beginning, I think it has been a very good session for Republicans in the legislature. But Senator Braun's right. It's been a great session for the people as well. Avoided a lot of really bad bills and passed 3 really good initiatives, and have 3 more really good initiatives coming to the ballot this year. I'll also say it's a good year for common sense. Senator Braun alluded at the beginning to some emerging ideological majorities. And that is what we need to get Washington back on track the quickest. I mentioned a minute ago my speech on opening day. One thing that I mentioned then was that the people we represent, most of them don't care if something is a Republican idea or a Democratic idea. They just care if it's a good idea. And we should have less of this rigid voting by caucus and allow folks to vote their conscience more often. There was a bill last year that would have restored police pursuits. It passed the Senate after a lot of internal consternation in the Senate Democratic caucus, and never was able to come to the floor for a vote in the House because of consternation inside the House Democratic caucus. Didn't matter that plenty of Democrats wanted to vote for it. Didn't matter that plenty of Democrats sponsored the bill. In fact, the House bill, the prime sponsor was a Democrat in a swing district who works really hard to keep getting reelected and representing her constituents. But when a very similar version finally made it to the floor in the form of the Pursuit Initiative yesterday, it passed overwhelmingly with something like 70-something votes. So it is absolutely crazy that a minority of the majority has the power to block common sense legislation from the House and Senate floor, bills that will pass with 70%, but can get blocked by a small faction of the majority party. That is not representative democracy. For all the concerns we hear about the death of democracy at the federal level, allowing a portion of one caucus to unilaterally block common sense bills that 70% of Washingtonians want, that's a threat to democracy. Thankfully, the initiative was able to break through that roadblock and come to the floor, and it will be law in 89 days. But a great victory for common sense, and a lot of this is possible when folks are free to vote their conscience rather than being kept in lockstep with caucus leadership.
All right, thanks for taking my questions.
All right. With that, we have one more question from Drew Mickelson of King 5, who asks, have any of you heard from sheriffs or police chiefs in your districts about what they will do come June when the initiative allows for more pursuits? What changes should citizens expect?
Yeah, I've been talking to law enforcement in my district, especially the county sheriffs, and I represent 4 different counties or parts of 4 different counties. And I think it's pretty clear what they're going to do, that this gives them more flexibility to pursue when it makes sense, but they have had both training and guidelines in place for many years, well before this whole thing started back in 2021, that tell officers when it's appropriate to pursue and when it's not, based on safety of the situation. And I think that they will simply go back to the training and that they've received and the guidance that they've put out to their deputies for many years. But now they have options to pursue when it's safe and makes sense, and they have reasonable suspicion that a crime was committed instead of probable cause. And that will allow them to pursue in some very common sense areas where people are conducting retail theft and simply driving away because they know the officer didn't actually see them and therefore doesn't have probable cause. So do I think there'll be a huge new rash of high-speed chases? No, I don't think so. What I do think is that they will empower officers to go out there and do the job as they are trained to do it, and do it well, and protect our communities around the state.
Yeah, I've had very, very similar experience to Senator Braun. I don't think I've heard any of my police chiefs say sort of with specificity exactly how their policy will change. But I've heard from a number of police chiefs in King and Pierce County who have they oppose the initial change to the pursuit law. They have been asking for it to be rolled back to the prior version in the intervening 3 or 4 years. They have told me they supported a bill from Eric Robertson 2 years ago, a bill from Alicia Rue last year that would have rolled back the pursuit law, and support the initiative now. So I assume that given they were willing to support the change in state law, they are prepared to implement it in their local departments. But that's exactly how the law existed before, and that makes sense. We should leave it up to communities to set the rules for their own communities. Local sheriffs, local police chiefs know their communities, know the risks, know the roads. They are best equipped to figure out what the department's policy should be, how to train their officers for that standard, and the rules to apply if the officer gets it wrong. So glad that in 89 days we'll be restoring some of that common sense and giving the power back to local police departments to pursue the bad guys when as much as they can.
All right. With that, we will go to closing remarks from the Republican leaders, starting with Representative Stokesbury.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I don't know if I have a whole lot left to add. I kind of hit everything. Again, it was a really good, productive session for House Republicans, for the people of Washington, for common sense. There was a lot of bad bills that would have, reduced employment in the long run, reduced access to rural health care, reduced the supply of housing, put more bad guys back on the streets, made elections more confusing and less democratic. Thanks to the work of House and Senate Republicans and ideological majorities that involve some legislative Democrats as well. All those bills have died. 3 initiatives have passed. 3 more will go to the people, where polling suggests they're very popular. So we did a lot of great work this session to stop making life worse in Washington, and but we've got a lot left to do to actually fix some of the problems and fix the housing crisis, fix the public safety crisis, fix the education crisis, fix the drug crisis, fix the affordability crisis. But House and Senate Republicans are up to the task, whether it's this session or next session and beyond. So thanks everybody for participating, and hope to see you all before we sign die.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. I'll just make a couple other comments. I mean, I think I go back to where we started this. We started with priorities focused on public safety for our families and communities. We started focused on affordability, food, gas, housing, childcare, healthcare, all have become unaffordable in our state. And we need to work on that. And on education, our children are not getting the education they deserve at every level. And the test scores clearly show that. I think we had a great session in terms of certainly in terms of recognizing bad policy that just didn't make sense, performing the role of the loyal opposition, if you will, and in pushing to stop that, finding partners on the other side of the aisle that also recognize that and stop that. I think we're very proud of that, and also put in a big thank you to each of the folks from the media that's on the call and the others that aren't here today. The role you play in informing the public and helping the public understand what's going on in Olympia and engage more proactively is enormously valuable, and I appreciate the work you do. I'm super proud of the fact that in response to historic 6 initiatives to the legislature, we pushed and finally yesterday got 3 of the 6 voted on, and as you saw, they all passed overwhelmingly off both chamber in both so I am of course disappointed that we at this point it looks like we won't get to the remaining 3, and I think in many ways those are the most important because they go to the affordability here in Washington more than anything. These are additional, in all effects, are additional taxes on people that approach them either in some cases directly, in many cases indirectly. That's making Washington more affordable, making the things they buy in Washington more unaffordable. And it's disappointing that we didn't get a chance to hear those in a hearing and ultimately vote on them. Fortunately, our Constitution allows those to go to a vote of the people in the fall if we don't get to them in the next few days. But I think it would have been much better had we actually worked on them in session. But that said, I am proud of the work that we collectively did. And I mean, not just as Republican caucuses, but as caucuses who are partnering folks on both sides of the aisle and listening to the people of the state of Washington and trying to do what we hear from them in terms of making their lives better and making our state better. So once again, thank you for being here, not only today, but all session as we try to do the best work we can for the people of the state of Washington.
Thank you, everyone.